Can hit with me. This ain't a diss song, but yeah, you know what it is. I'm a cheesehead, y'all niggas cheese whiz. Pittsburgh Steelers, that's nothing. That Super Bowl ring, that's nothing. Pull up in your town when you see me, you know everything. Green and yellow, green and yellow, green and yellow, green and yellow. I put it down, representing for my team. I'm in green.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, sitting next to the one and only Wes Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. This show truly is unscripted because I did not see that coming. All right. Wes, we're a couple days removed now from the Packers' 31-24 victory at Arrowhead Stadium over the Kansas City Chiefs. And Matt LaFleur, as usual, the day after a game has his press conference. He actually gave the players what's called a Victory Monday, where they weren't totally off on Monday, leading into their regular day off on Tuesday, but the responsibilities very minimal. A lot of meetings got pushed back to Wednesday morning, so the players getting a bit of a break. One of the topics at LaFleur's press conference was his mentality, his approach with the team, the whole going 1-0 every week, staying focused on, that game right in front of you. It's an old adage, it's a worn out cliche, but I wrote about this on our website. In looking at this Packers team, the 2019 Green Bay Packers, this approach is working, and it's interesting to me that it's working because this is not a team with a whole bunch of NFL veterans who have chalked up all kinds of playoff victories and winning seasons. And it's not a roster of 53 guys that necessarily knows what it takes to do that in the NFL, to deal with the long haul and the grind and the week after week and staying focused on what's in front of you. Yet that's what these guys have done, and they're at the midway point, and they're 7-1. And whatever the message that LaFleur is delivering is definitely sinking in.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting thing that you brought up in your story today or last night on Packers.com. 42 of the 53 guys on this roster right now weren't even on the 2016 NFC Championship game team.
Right.
That shows you, that there's been 9 draft classes since the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010. So, yeah, the mentality needs to shift. There needs to be sort of a rejuvenation of this roster. And, I was thinking about this too, and it might even be something that leads to a story here in the next couple days or weeks. Aaron Jones didn't win a lot in college. And then he had, 2 below 500 seasons to start his NFL career. Suddenly he's 7-1 for what I imagine might be the first time since high school, even if they had that much success back then when him and Elvin Jr. were playing for Burgess High School in El Paso, Texas.
The twin brothers in El Paso.
But, I think if you would have come out, if Matt LaFleur's message, not that he would have ever done this or any coach would really do this, but if his, message going into the Chicago game to start the season, 100th season of the NFL is, I want to be 7-1 at the midway point in the season. Everybody would be kind of like, oh, shoot, man, that's a big, lofty goal. You could have a team coming off of a Super Bowl and not, be able to attain such a goal.
Yeah.
But when you look at it and you take it in bits and pieces, there's an old phrase that a good friend of mine, Jody Van Lannen, a Schwabendown wrestling coach, always used to use when I was covering preps, basically seeing, you're eating the elephant. And, it's one bite at a time. You can't take the whole thing right at the beginning. And I look at that in this situation and that perspective and that vision is that you're 7-1 and you've earned every single one of those victories and you've done it in a week-to-week capacity. And when you have a roster of a lot of young guys that haven't been to this level before, haven't seen this amount of success in this league, I think that's the right approach. And it's, for my money, one of the reasons why I think Matt LaFleur, like I said at the end of yesterday's show, deserves to be in that conversation right now for NFL Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I think I took a look at the roster construction and putting that story together because I thought it was really interesting. I mean, you and I have been here a long time. You get used to, a lot of people around here got used to the Packers being in the playoffs every year. It was a great run, 9 straight playoff appearances, or 9 or 8, I can't remember. 8, yeah. Sorry, 8 straight playoff
9's
appearances.
Cool too, though.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But then, you have 2 losing seasons back to back, and obviously a lot of different reasons, a lot went into that. But you look at the roster, 31 of the 53 players were not even in the NFL when the Packers went to the NFC Championship game in 2016. Then 11 additional players, veteran players who are here, were not on that particular Packers 2016 team. And I think the dynamic, and this is a little bit of assumption on my part, but I think part of the dynamic that's making this work is you have a first-year coach whose message is certainly sinking in to that bevy of young players on this roster, but you also have the veterans. Yes, you have your Mason Crosbys and your Aaron Rodgers who have been a part of a lot of success in Green Bay, but you also, those other veterans who were not here for the 2016 successful season that ended in Atlanta, you have your Mercedes Lewis, you have your Zadarius Smiths, you have your Jimmy Grahams, even Tramon Williams, who was in Green Bay and left and came back. Those are guys who have been a part of successful postseason runs either elsewhere earlier in their careers, however you want to phrase it, and their message in the locker room is backing up what Matt LaFleur is preaching to his team about going 1-0 every week and staying focused on that game that's right in front of you and preparing putting everything you have preparation-wise into that one game, because frankly, Wes, that's how you answer the bell when the Detroit Lions come into Lambeau Field on a Monday night and jump on you 10-0. Right. That's how you answer the bell when your 14-0 lead at Arrowhead Stadium is wiped out almost in a flash and you're down 17-14 to start the second half. This team has shown an ability to respond, and I don't think a team can respond in those situations like that if it's worried about the big picture, if it's worried about anything other than that game that is right in front of it, either from a preparation standpoint or in the moment. And it's working for this group.
It really is. And it's funny, if you ever want to have an interesting conversation, it's one I've had, I think, once or twice this year. It was with Tramon Williams. Tramon Williams hasn't been to the playoffs since the NFC Championship game in 2014.
Yeah.
I think there was a certain part of him that was wondering, he obviously when he re-signed with Green Bay, that was one of his motivating factors. He wanted to have one more chance to make a run at a Super Bowl ring. But when the season goes like it did last year, and then suddenly you're 36, I mean, you're starting to see the horizon there a little bit. And then suddenly here we are at 7-1 at this juncture of the season. And as much momentum and, feelings as the Packers have right now of what this potentially could become for this roster. But as you said, I mean, I think that's one thing that really stands out to me the most when, you look at this entire roster piece by piece, brick by brick. There's a lot of guys that are hungry. And they all have their different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You think about Jimmy Graham and his continued search for a Super Bowl ring. You think about, the young guys on this roster like Jair Alexander that, they want to play winning football. They want to be a part of that. And, even, at the receiver position, Devontae Adams has seen this offense, has seen this roster at its best, 2014 and 16. That's the stuff that I think when you look at it's what makes football special.
Yeah.
Because in the NBA, certainly you can go and sign a guy and bring him in, and maybe it was Jason Terry with the Bucks a few years ago that had some pelts on the wall and had an NBA ring tattoo on his shoulder. But a lot of those guys, unless you experience it, you don't know what it's like. But with football, there's so many guys in those locker rooms that somebody has a story. Somebody has had their heart ripped out. Somebody has triumphed. And I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Aaron Rodgers talked about it in his locker. I mean, there's probably on one hand right now guys that have a Super Bowl ring in that locker room. And for Matt LaFleur, now he's also a guy that has been at the pinnacle of his coaching profession and seen, what those big games are like as a coordinator and as a position coach. So
yeah, he was a coach who was in a Super Bowl and on the verge of winning a Super Bowl just 3 years ago with Atlanta in 2016, when obviously the last time the Packers also had a successful season.
So I think when you go into a year like this, when I think there's as many doubters as they had, whether it was Aaron Rodgers, whether it was LaFleur, whether it was just this entire makeup of this roster, if this was all going to work, Kevin King, can he be a starting cornerback for this team? There's just so many different things that people wanted to throw on this football team. And the reason why, at the end of the day, that they're sitting here at 7-1 is because of their faith in that locker room. Now, certainly they've had to, they haven't been challenged a lot with adversity. There's been a couple instances, and those roadblocks will eventually come, and you have to deal with them then. But it's a lot easier to deal with, Mike, when you're 5, 6, 7 games above 500, and that's the position the Packers have put themselves in at the mid-quarter pole. Would you say that? Is that right? The mid-quarter pole of the season? The second quarter pole of the season?
No, I just call it the midway point.
Ah, okay.
Sorry.
You always use that. You always like that.
I know. I
always
would say quarter pole, but
and
then,
I'm trying
but
to
then
play
once
off
you get
it.
once you get past that, you can't use that anymore. Sorry, I should have warned you.
No, that's okay. I liked my mid-quarter pole phrase though. I might work that one into inbox here. So.
All right, you have the freedom to do that.
But you're halfway through the regular season now.
Yeah,
it goes just like that. And you look at Atlanta and some of these teams that are struggling. You have to be grateful for what you have today. Packers going to L.A. now with a chance to pick up their 8th win. It's incredible.
One other point I want to make, too. There's some interesting dynamics with the new players that were brought in here. A couple of them that I didn't mention. When you talk about their history in the NFL, their pedigree, whatever you want to call it, Preston Smith, he makes the playoffs as a rookie, if I'm not mistaken, in Washington. He hasn't been back.
Got bounced by the Packers.
Yeah, bounced by the Packers as a rookie, but didn't make it back to the playoffs. Now he's in year 5 trying to get that taste of the postseason and make a run. Adrian Amos finally makes it to the playoffs in his 4th year with the Chicago Bears. They win the NFC North. They get bounced right away in the first round. He decides to obviously go another way with free agency. He comes to Green Bay, but he just got a taste of it and wants to keep it going. To me, it's, as you say, every guy has a story, and I think a lot of those stories in the Packers locker room are adding up to just a really interesting mix as to what's going on.
Yeah,
here.
I smell an inbox headline too, by the way.
Okay.
I think either whether it's you or me, if you want to take that one, feel free, but I think that can definitely work for an inbox headline. No, and it's absolutely true. And one more thing I just want to touch on before we move on. It was another aspect of your story that I was reading that I think is really critical when you look at how this team is constructed, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Matt LaFleur was asked about, okay, you had these emerging weapons now. When you look at what Aaron Jones and what Jamal Williams have done, what are you going to do with all these pieces once Davante Adams is back in the fold? He said it's a good problem to have.
Yep.
It is an issue they're going to have to figure out. But what I really like about the maturation process of both Jones and Williams, they also know how to operate when they don't get the touches. I'm not saying they won't get touches, but it's not like, okay, you go into a game plan, I got to feed Aaron Jones. He has to touch the ball 20 times. Jamal has to get the ball 15 times. That's just the way it has to be. It's the only way we're going to make this thing work. Those guys are just incredibly flexible with how they use them, and they don't get pushy about it.
Yeah.
That's, I think, ultimately what can make this offense its most dangerous. There's a lot of unselfish ball players, and it's led by that number 17 in that room and the receivers.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, the other perimeter weapons the Packers have, we'll see if Davante Adams is back this week or whenever he does come back, but I think part of the message at that point is going to be not for the rest of these guys to, take a deep breath and go, oh, okay, Davante's back. It's like, no, stay as hungry as you've been for getting the ball and for the touches. Yes, you have to be a team player, but you have to maintain that hunger and that awareness and that alertness as to when your opportunity is going to come, because there's still going to be more opportunities down the road. And what has happened the last 4 weeks and getting all these other guys involved, as we talked about, the Packers want to make that pay off down the road when those guys individually need to answer the bell in the future.
Yeah, because I guarantee you right now, Mike, the Packers are not going to have an empty injury report in week 16 or 17.
No question about it.
There's going to be players you're going to have to persevere on without. It's just the way that this game is played, the way the league is constructed. But the nice thing for the Green Bay Packers is they are now 2 weeks away from their bye week. They're at 7-1, and for the most part, despite a few nicks and bruises, have had most of their complementary pieces And when you didn't have that big one in Devontae Adams, they've still found a way to win.
Yeah, keep on winning. Well, let's review a little bit of what happened in Week 8 in the NFL. I think the place to start is the game I think that's most interesting to Packers fans because it involved the Chicago Bears and Green Bay's upcoming opponent, the Los Angeles Chargers. 17-16 at Soldier Field. The Chargers squeak out a victory. The Bears drop below 500 at 3-4. You want to know how quickly things can turn in the NFL. Just look at the Chicago Bears. They've gone, in half a season, they've gone from the defending NFC North champions to last place in the division, just like that. I mean, and I'm not saying that the season is over for the Bears by any means. They're still, they only have 7 games in. They've still got 9 left to go. They have plenty of time to figure this out. But the Bears lose on a last-second missed field goal by Eddie Pinheiro. Really strange game, Wes, when you take a look at the highlights of this one. Both these teams, kickers were missing field goals. Both teams were getting the ball inside the 10, inside the 5, goal-to-go situations, and nobody could punch it in. They kept having to settle for those chip shot field goals. That's why the score ended up 17-16. Both of these teams were absolutely desperate for a victory in a lot of ways, and the Chargers, for everything that's gone wrong late in games for them multiple times this year, they finally caught a break, and the missed field goal gives Los Angeles a 3-5 record now heading into the matchup with Green Bay.
You know, the one thing you mentioned, the fact that obviously they've had some issues with kickers in this game. You know, the Chargers, they've kind of been thrown in a bad spot because of Michael Bagley and his injury. I mean, he was one of the top kickers in the league last year. I did talk to him at the Combine 2 years ago. I just want to put that out there.
There you go.
And they've kind of had to throw their cards up in the air and, you know, make sense of all this. The Chicago Bears, this is nothing new. This has been a storyline that has followed them for a better part of, 2 years now? 2.5 years at this juncture of it. And
whenever they decided to move on from Robbie Gould, which obviously looks like an extremely poor decision on their part because they haven't been able to make it work.
Yeah, and I've said since the beginning, especially when there was this kicking competition, I wish Sam Ficken well in the Jets, but once you know what you have, you don't want to start making questions at that position.
Yeah.
And credit to both Ted Thompson with Mason Crosby in 2012 and 13, and now Brian Gutekunst, that they've stayed true to their kicker. Stand by your kicker. But here's the other thing, as far as the Chicago Bears are concerned. A lot was made out of the decision at the end of that game. I understand why Matt Nagy did what he did.
Yeah.
Would I have run the ball? I think I would have. Now, if you have Adam Vinatieri in his prime, and it's just like get him the ball at the right hash mark from 41 yards out, you have the confidence, absolutely. That's not the deck they're playing with, though, right now.
Yeah.
And I think even if it was an extra yard or two, as it showed with Pinheiro doinking it off, what was it, the right upright, left upright?
Yeah, his first field goal attempt of the day, early in the game, he clanked it off the upright from basically extra point distance.
Right.
Now you're another 8 yards back from that. You're relying on him to make a 41-yarder. I think the question to take a knee there was it was a highly questionable decision because, again, let's be real here. This is Soldier Field.
Yeah.
You're right on the lake. There are winds. This is not an easy place to kick. Anytime you are outside of extra point distance in a stadium like that and you're not smack dab, even if you are in the middle of the field from 40 yards, anything 35 plus at Soldier Field can be an adventure at any given moment. And certainly with the position the Bears are in and the fact that Pinheiro had already missed one earlier in the game, I just think you have to try to get as close as possible and not just concede that you're going to kick a 40-plus yarder there. And Nagy obviously has gone on the defensive with it. Certainly his prerogative. He's going to defend his decision. But I think perfectly within anyone's rights to question it.
Well, and the way this is going to play out now for the Bears is they have one of the hardest schedules in the second half of the season, really, of any team in the NFL. They get that divisional, reward or whatever you want to call it, where you got to take on the top,
those
finishing
those first place teams,
place teams from a year ago. So they're going to have the Philadelphia Eagles here coming up. There's a lot of questions there the Bears are going to have to answer, and it doesn't get any easier, especially with the Eagles coming off a pretty big win against the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
I'll look at this whole thing, Mike, and it's just interesting to me in that the way this season is playing out, you have undefeated teams, you have winless teams. We could very well have the first season, since maybe ever that you're going to end up having 2 winless teams. That's potential, with the way that this is playing out with Cincinnati right now. And then obviously the issue that Miami's working through. But you look at this conference.
Do Cincinnati and Miami play each other?
Do they?
They might play each other.
Let me look. But as I'm looking at that, the fact of the matter is this NFC race is just incredible to watch. San Francisco just walloping Carolina, and then you look at the way that New Orleans was able to stem the tide to get back to Drew Brees, and Drew Brees looks like he never left in that game. That's incredible how that works out. They do play each other in Week 16.
There you go.
I got ahead of myself.
I'm
sorry. But the NFC race is compelling, and I think a couple guys talked about in the locker room after the game. With Minnesota winning again, the Packers have to keep winning, and the more wins you stack up, obviously you're trying to win your division, but that's also going to keep you at the head of that wild card race and trying to keep you within arm's reach of a first round bye. So a lot on the line for all these teams, but certainly a lot of very talented teams in the NFC that are contending for spots right now.
Yeah, well, and we saw the Detroit Lions get back on track in the NFC North. Matthew Stafford with another big game. There's some things out there. You look at what Stafford is doing at quarterback. The Lions are right in this thing at 3-3-1. They've already had their bye, but they have 9 games left, and they're going to have opportunities to state their case and to be talked about amongst the NFC playoff contenders. They're as a 500 team right now, they're on the fringe. But you look at what Stafford is doing on a weekly basis, Wes, and we all know what a hot quarterback can do for any team. And yes, they can't find a running game, and their best running back is now injured. Kerryon Johnson is on the injured list, but the Detroit Lions, it's a team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think you got to tip your cap to Matthew Stafford too, because if you don't have a running game, all eyes are on you.
Yeah,
Trey Carson,
and he's dealt with it a lot.
Yeah, over the last decade. And Trey Carson started this game for Detroit. He was on the Packers practice squad 2 weeks ago. So there are a lot of pressures on him, but he's finding a way to make it work. I've talked about it numerous times. Kenny Galladay looks like a really talented player. At the time we're taping this, there's still a lot to happen with the NFL trade deadline.
Yes.
There's some overtures out there, some rumors and innuendo that maybe they'd potentially be willing to move Darius Slay. I think that would be a mistake. That's one of your biggest pieces in terms of your defense. Didn't they make a
big enough mistake last year when they moved on from Golden Tate? They took Matthew Stafford's most comfortable target based on the 2018 season, and they just moved on from him, and then their season went nowhere. So maybe they're just looking for the king's ransom or whatever, but even you're still in this thing, and you've got a quarterback in his prime. I'm just not understanding the idea of moving on from quality pieces.
So do I have a minute to ask you a question here about
Absolutely.
the NFL in 2019?
Yes.
What do you think of the fact that 2 of the best teams in the league right now, San Francisco and Baltimore, have basically turned the clock all the way back to like 1960 with these rushing heavy offenses?
What do you
make of it?
I think it's great. I think it's forcing teams in a 1 week preparation scenario, and the Packers are going to be dealing with this. The Packers will have their bye week before the San Francisco game, but in a 1 week preparation scenario to get ready for something that you don't see on a regular basis. It's like what goes on in college football when you have that one game where you have to face like the triple option offense, and you're not going to see that at any other time. That's a little bit of an extreme example, but what these teams are doing, the way they're pounding the football, using quarterbacks in different ways, obviously playing stout defense. It's a preparation challenge, and those teams are taking advantage of the fact that they are making themselves difficult to prepare for.
Can you win a Super Bowl that way?
I don't know.
It's a big question.
It is a big question because in January and in the playoffs it comes down to making big plays and making a lot of big plays at crunch time in the fourth quarter, making things happen. It's really difficult in this league when you're facing the elite teams with the elite quarterbacks and with where offenses have been heading for the last 10 to 15 years, it's very difficult to sort of just grind a team to dust, so to speak, when it comes to January. You can win a lot of games in the regular season, as I say, being a preparation challenge, but then how that carries over to the postseason is sort of the let's wait and see mode, at least for me.
Yeah, and I've seen more of San Francisco than Baltimore this year, but San Francisco has been incredibly disciplined, and that helps them in how they've been able to succeed. The reason why I think it's a fascinating way to play football, though, because if you look at this past week, I mean, I think they had 3 different guys that had 10 carries or something like that. It's great when you're ahead. If you fall behind, that's a challenging way to play the game.
Yes, it is.
And then when you get to the end of the season, you're playing the best teams. I'm fascinated by San Francisco. I love what Kyle Shanahan's doing. Really curious, and we're going to be able to see it up close and personal here in a month, but very curious to see where that train takes them, because it's an intriguing, different look at this league that we haven't seen in a number of years.
Yeah. Well, we'll have an interesting discussion on tomorrow's show looking a little bit more closely at the Chargers, because they've decided to move on from their offensive coordinator. Ken Wisenhunt has been fired, so some changes in the coaching structure there, but we will get to that on tomorrow's show. For now, it's a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team on Packers.com. You can subscribe to us, like us on iTunes and other podcast services. On Twitter, he's at Wes Hot. I'm at Mike Spofford at Packers for the team account. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you next time.
Oh yeah. Young Moolah, baby.